What's up, guys? Welcome to Algorithm Empowerment. My name is Olivia, and today I'll be talking about a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. So, Robert has a pretty interesting background. He grew up in Hawaii and ended up joining the military after high school and fighting in the Vietnam War. After that, he came back to work as a salesman at a Xerox company. It wasn't really for him, so he went ahead and started his own company, and from there started many of his own companies, became a super savvy investor, and currently runs a financial literacy company. So, what I liked the most about this book is that anybody can read it and you don't have to have any financial knowledge to understand what he's talking about. Now, the book starts off from the perspective of him as a child, and he compares his father's viewpoints on money to his friend's father's viewpoints on money. His father started off in the middle class and stayed in the middle class, while his friend's father was in the beginning stages of building an empire and eventually went on to become a really wealthy man. Throughout the book, he outlines all of the lessons as the chapters, but before he even gets into the first lesson, he talks about a concept that I think is the most important part of the whole book, and that's the mindset on money. Now, the poor and the middle class mindset on money, when they see something expensive that they want, is, I can't afford that. With the rich, they ask a question, how can I afford that? Now, the difference between the two is that with the poor and middle class mindset, their mind is already made up. They've closed the door to any further thinking because they've already told themselves that there's no way that they're going to be able to afford it. With the rich, however, by asking the question of how, even though they aren't able to afford it right now, they're forcing themselves to think of a creative way that they could possibly come up with the money. So, regardless of what your current financial circumstances are, you can always embody this upper class mindset on money. Robert Kiyosaki said that even when he was broke, he always made sure that he continued to adapt this mindset. He says that the rich see money as an illusion, which means there are no emotions involved and less reactions, and they're not a slave to it. But with the middle class, he says that they run on emotions with money, and the two emotions are fear and desire. The fear that they'll never have enough, and the desire to always have more. So the first lesson is that rich don't work for money, they have money work for them. He talks about three types of income, and that is job income, portfolio income, and passive income. Job income is coming from your everyday normal 40-hour-a-week job. Portfolio income comes from things like stocks, bonds, and investments. And passive income, an example of this would be buying a house and then renting it out. You're making money each month without really having to do anything. The possibilities for passive income are really unlimited and all dependent on your own creativity. He says that when your mind is clear, you aren't basing any decisions on fear or desire, so it's easier to come up with solutions because you aren't in a reactive state. You're choosing to think rather than react spontaneously. When you use your imagination to identify an opportunity to make money that others miss, that's really the key. He gives an example in his book that when he was a kid, him and his friend Mike worked for his friend's dad for free every Saturday. The reason that Rich Dad wanted them to work for free was because he wanted them to look for an opportunity to make money, and he thought that if he paid them, that they wouldn't really have the motivation to look for other ways to make an income. After a few weeks of working for free, they started to get frustrated until they saw another woman who worked in the convenience store cutting out the tops of some old comics. They asked her why she was doing this, and she said that when you cut out the top, you can return the top of them and then get credit towards the next new comic. The kids asked if they could have all these old comics, and she said yes, because she didn't have any use for them. Then they went around to all the other convenience stores and collected more of these comics, and then they set up a little library in their garage. They would charge kids 10 cents after school to come in and read as many comics as they wanted. They even hired Mike's sister to be the librarian. The kids thought that this was a steal because they could pay 10 cents and read as many comics as they wanted, or if you wanted to buy a new comic in the store, it would cost 10 cents. Since they hired Mike's sister, they didn't even have to be there. This is the ideal example of passive income because they're not there, but they're still making money. And this really illustrates the lesson that the rich don't work for money, they have money work for them. Now, in your own life, you don't have to be extreme and give up your primary source of income to do this. But what you should do is adopt the shift in mindset, and that is where you're open to looking and identifying new ways that you can use your primary income to invest in opportunities that come your way that other people miss simply because they haven't been exposed to the ideals or because they're focused on their only job and that's it. So, lesson number 2 is it's not how much money you make, but how much you keep. We've all heard about those lottery winners that go from zero to millionaire overnight, and then we see them on TLC's Curse of the Lottery 5 years later, completely broke. The problem isn't making more money, but learning how to actually manage it. He says that oftentimes more money only leads to greater debt, and a job with more is just a short-term solution to a long-term problem. He says true financial intelligence is how much money you keep and how many generations you can keep it. The first step in learning to manage money is learning the difference between an asset and a liability. He says that rich people acquire assets, while middle-class people acquire liabilities that they think are assets. His definition of an asset is anything that you acquire that puts money into your pockets, and liabilities are those things that you acquire that take money out of your pockets. So an example of a liability mistaken for an asset is a house. The general consensus is that your home is your biggest asset, but he explains that a home is not an asset because when you buy a house, you take out a 30-year mortgage, which requires you to pay a certain amount each month, and that is the definition of a liability. You never actually own it, and although you have tax breaks, you have many more expenses, and you have to pay them with after-tax dollars. With all this money tied up in liabilities mistaken for assets, such as cars, golf clubs, boats, this money is not available when an opportunity arises. Instead of taking out loans to buy luxuries that you don't have the money for, he says you should use your extra income to buy real assets. These include things like stocks, bonds, investments, homes that you plan to rent, and pretty much anything that you can come up with that will produce passive income. He says the trick is to have income greater than expenses and assets greater than liabilities. So next time you think about buying a luxury such as a new laptop, take the money that you would have paid for the laptop and invest it in an income-producing asset. Once you've doubled your money, then go ahead and buy that laptop, because nothing is lost and you earn the money that you needed. He said this is another primary difference in the rich and middle class mindset. The middle class will borrow to buy luxuries, while the rich will use income-generating assets to buy luxuries. So I grew up learning the middle class mindset. And the biggest thing that I took away from this book is that there's another mindset out there, and that's having the openness to believe that you can generate income through other sources outside of your everyday 40-hour-a-week job. Even if you don't know how you're going to do this yet, just knowing that there are other options available for you to utilize and believing that you have the capability to learn is the first and biggest step. This step already puts you ahead of most people because they've already made up their minds about what's possible for them. I encourage you to read the entire book because we only touched on a few of the chapters, and he goes into greater detail about how to actually apply these lessons in later chapters. So, no matter who you are, where you are, or what you do, always remember, keep giving her.